Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another podcast. This is episode 3 with Alvin Ramee. This is I Should Do a Podcast. I have a special guest today. I think I met this guest, 2012, 2013. He's been doing some awesome things with the Navajo outreach community, and he has a deep passion for cultural relevance with the church. We want to talk about that. He's a pastor. He's been a radio DJ for over 14 years. I'd like to introduce everyone to our special guest today, all the way from somewhere in Idaho. All the way from somewhere in Idaho, man. I'd like to welcome our special guest today, Bryan Bacon. Welcome to the podcast, Bryan. How's everything, brother?
Hey, what's up, man? Thanks for having me. Things are good. I am in South Central Idaho in a town called Twin Falls. So just remember, South Central,
okay,
Twin Falls.
Okay, we heard of Twin Falls. The audience knows what Twin Falls is. Okay, we got an idea of what Twin Falls is. Okay, so
yeah.
So what's there to do in Idaho, man?
Yeah, so over 70% of Idaho is public land. So great outdoors are preserved kind of indefinitely. So even if you're in a more populated area, with just a short hop and a skip, you can get to the mountains. Right outside of Twin Falls is the Snake River Canyon that is kind of like a miniature Grand Canyon. And then pouring into the canyon is the legendary Shoshone Falls, which are actually higher, not wider, than Niagara, and actually at their height in the season push out more water. And so that's all just right here in Twin Falls. Otherwise, it's a high desert that driving through just looks like ugly parts of Southern California, but there's a lot of hidden gems in different places. And that's a pun because this is the gem state. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff to do outdoorsy like.
He said that's a pun because this is gem state. I caught that. See, you're a rapper. You didn't even know it.
Yeah, I just like to help people out, you know?
Okay. So tell me something, man. I heard, you told me you did radio for over 14 years. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so what brought me to Idaho, I'm originally from Kansas, Western Kansas, so I'm a Midwest boy. But I ended up in California in high school and college. And while I was in Bible college, kind of praying about and seeking out what I wanted to do, I got an invite from a homie in Idaho to come up and intern as a radio DJ. And at the time, I was doing some mobile DJing as kind of a side hustle for weddings and funerals and school dances and all that stuff. I never did a bar mitzvah, unfortunately.
Oh.
But yeah, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to be like an actual like radio disc jockey?" And I was like, interesting. So I agreed to a 3-month internship. And so actually, at the 29th of last month, I celebrated 23 years in Idaho.
Wow.
And I actually moved here before I even turned 20. And so I came up, interned, and I was like, this is the place. And while I was interning there, I was also volunteering at the local youth group. And so 2 years after I got here, I was ordained as the youth pastor. And then about 8 years ago is when we started a new church. And I've been a lead pastor for 8 years as of March. And that's when I quit DJing because I had to do that. I had to start, pastoring full time because I was kind of like, full-time DJ, part-time youth pastor. And then I went into, full-time pastoring.
Okay. With that,
and it was a national radio syndicate, CSN International.
Okay.
Yeah, CSN International and Effect Radio, and I did 2 special shows that the Christian radio never has. I did a hip hop and urban style show, and then I did a heavier show with like punk rock, metal, and hardcore. And these were things that even Christian rock radio is like afraid to play on the regular, especially back in the day. And so I would spin anything that was gospel centered that showed some talent.
Okay.
And if I was still doing it, I would have been spinning some of your stuff too.
Man, so you telling me you brought Christian hip hop to Idaho? Are you telling me this?
Yes,
Okay.
I brought it to Idaho and 49 other stations nationwide.
Wow, man.
There was 50 stations names on, and I even did some collab with like DJ Madge and stuff like that.
Okay.
If you remember who DJ Madge is.
Heard the name right now, can't recall
And he
the
used to
face.
he used to roll with like Toby Mac, and he was like his like concert DJ, and then he also like did his own album, and he did a lot of like mixtapes and stuff like that. But anyway,
Okay, that's real dope, man. I remember you guys putting some of my music on way back and when I was young enough and my knees didn't crack when I jumped up and down on stage. But man, those were the days, man.
Yeah,
Tell me
dude, I know.
about what influenced you to like obviously you have a hip hop passion. What were some of your influences to get into hip hop? And I'll get into the punk rock and death metal later.
Yeah. So, growing up, I lived in a couple of different inner city situations, and I kind of liked being the only white kid in my neighborhood. Because I just have to be honest. I like attention. I have to be careful about good attention versus bad attention.
It's
but
good to
I like
acknowledge it, though. Okay.
Right. And so one of the places. So I lived in a couple of different big areas in California, Central and Southern, and then I also lived in El Paso, which I know the rest of Texas don't claim it, and I understand why. That's why God built some mountains around El Paso to kind of shield the rest of Texas from it. And people from there, we called it Hell Paso because it's not a great place to live. But some of it had to do with just for my affinity for urban culture and early stuff that I listened to before I came to Christ. I got introduced to like Cypress Hill and Beastie Boys and then some more like heavier stuff like the Ghetto Boys and obviously every white kid thinks they're cool for listening to NWA and all that stuff. And so I was I was listening to a lot of that stuff with my friends and just realized, dude, man, I love this. This helps me kind of express who I am. And I had shared with you earlier that I'm what you call neurodivergent with a very misunderstood ADHD. And so music speaks to me and always has in just a very unique way. Sometimes, and we all find that, right? Because I think God created music to help us to express ourselves as humans. And so I'd hear a song or hear some bars and I'd be like, oh, dude, that's how I feel. How did you get into my mind? And then I'd play that thing on repeat, like over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
But so then when I came to Christ, actually before I came to Christ, when I was just going to church for a couple of years, going to youth group, I was dating this Christian girl. And somebody handed me Gospel Gangsta's CD.
Wow.
And again, I was in Southern California, not very far from where they're at, because they came out of Los Angeles, and I was just like, "What, dude? These guys are real, like actual gangsters, but they love Jesus, so they're not banging like these other guys." And I was like, "Dang, this is rad." And that's why I got super into it, and started just like consuming mass quantities of Christian hip hop and even R&B, and so. The love just enhanced as like I said, I came to Christ and realized that He made me to appreciate music, and that hip hop being one of the more extreme forms of music that I was drawn to, that of course my parents and some of my peers did not approve of, which made me almost like it more, but yeah, that's kind of where I came into that particular genre.
Okay. When it goes to your punk rock metal days, tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, first of all, this isn't PC, but I'm white trash. But it's like, my family, actually, a lot of my family lives in trailer parks in New Mexico, which is just hilarious. But it's kind of like, certain demographics of space. There's certain just music styles that are just like, more prolific there,
Yeah.
and so metal and punk rock and classic rock for that matter. And I also like some like old school country, but I don't really like anything after like 1990 because it just started becoming trash in my opinion.
Pop.
It sounds like R&B with twang, and I'd rather just have R&B, please, but
Exactly.
anyway, so I grew up listening to, um Johnny Cash, Charlie Pride with my parents, and I kind of naturally rebelled against that originally, which I like it now again. But so some of my friends, I remember, let's see, the first, because every kid in my group, even the non-white trash kids, all like Metallica. But somebody in junior high handed me a tape by a metal band called Pantera.
Wow.
And they're what you call thrash metal.
Yeah.
And I listened to it and I was like, dude, and no joke, in 8th grade, I lived in Minnesota, and for our PE class, we were doing line dancing, which is typical typical rural white America. We're doing line dancing, which was cool. It was cool. And then we were all supposed to bring in a song, and that had to have a certain beat, right? And so I brought in "Walk" by Pantera because it's actually perfect. Because it's like and like it's perfect for line dancing, like just the setup. And it was so awesome because the teacher said, any song as long as it's this beat, I'll play it. And dude, I was just grinning ear to ear while she is like turning bright red, and we're going through the entire song of Pantera line dancing. And I felt like I was the coolest kid in school. I don't know if everybody else thought so, but I felt like it. And it just kind of continued to grow. And then again, when I first came to church, I should say, in 1994, and that, by the way, was the year that the Gang Affiliated album debuted by Original Gospel Gangsters. And then I got handed me this Australian death metal CD by a band called Mortification. And the name of the album is Post Momentary Affliction.
Wow.
And what you'll find in those types of metal that is actually quite similar to hip hop is a form of music where you can get a lot of intellectual ideas, arguments, statements, and teachings through, in a short song, so much content. Rappers that can throw a ton of bars in a song and have it sound good are just like metalheads that can throw a ton of words into one song with some rad riffs, right?
Right.
And I noticed, although these things sound totally different, these are the same crowd, just in different groups, And that's when I started to just grow in love for the extreme forms of music that, again, most of our parents and grandparents hate, right? It doesn't matter where you're from.
Yeah.
They think hip hop is terrible. They hate everything about it. They think metal is terrible. They think they're all satanic and misogynistic. And yeah, there's definitely parts of each of those that definitely are, but not as a genre, right? And so those are the things. And I will say this, being in Christian radio, and I booked a lot of shows too here, booked a lot of artists, mostly metal and hardcore and punk rock, but actually a decent number of hip hop artists too. And what I found is that people are drawn to these things because they are more extreme forms of expression.
Wow.
And because of that too, I think it almost agitates the general Pharisaical attitude in most people that want to just keep cultural norms and keep things the way they always have been. And so these are genres to me that are naturally rebellious, but again, in a good way. And what I found is that within Christian music, that Christian hip hop and Christian metal, hardcore, and punk rock are actually the most groundbreaking, most unique, and the most non-conforming genres in Christian music. And they are breaking new paths. They are pioneers of new subgenres,
Okay.
and they have respect in the secular community like no other genres of Christian music do.
Wow.
Your non-Christian friends, they're not going to turn on K-Love. And no disrespect to K-Love. I mean,
Which is
there's a
true.
couple of artists on there that I love, and I know they're doing stuff for Jesus, but your non-Christian friends are not going to turn on K-Love. They're not going to listen to that. But I have two very good atheist friends. And we're talking like these are hardcore dudes, right? Like they had face tats,
Wow.
when they were like 18, you know what I mean? And these guys are like brawlers and fighters and haters. And every single one of them, they're spinning something Christ-centered. And it's either going to be in the hip hop realm or in the harder music genre.
Wow.
And that says something right there.
Okay, you said something and you were touching on it, and I want to ask you to kind of give a little bit more of your take on this, where metal, hip hop, there's sort of a connotation of rebellion. How do you reconcile the notion of being a rebellious genre in bringing it to the Christian aspect, where obedience is sort of it's a fruit of the spirit? So how do we take that and message?
Obviously, obedience to the Lord is imperative, right?
Yes, sir.
And yeah, what do we do about that? That's a great question. And so, two things. One, it just in all ways, whatever Satan intends for evil, God does for good, right? We see that first in Genesis in the story of Joseph. His brothers sold him into slavery, right?
Okay.
And he never once complains because he says something to them that reveals his philosophy, which should always be the philosophy of any of the faithful who put their faith in the Father, right? And that is, what you intended for evil, God intended for good.
Wow.
And just like you and I know, brother, is that sex is not evil, right?
Right.
We know out of the context where God intends it is. I mean, there's really no evil, like even using herbs and such. And I'm not, just so you know, I don't smoke weed, but even using herbs and such, God made things for us to use for medicinal purposes, but He doesn't advocate abuse.
Absolutely.
There's so many things that we just kind of label as bad because we think that there's only bad ways to do it, including like the emotion of anger. We tend to think that anger is a wrong emotion, when in reality, it is part of even the nature of God that He made us in His image to express. And the word does not say don't be angry. It says be angry and don't sin.
Right.
And we see Christ even in His righteous anger kicking over tables and upsetting the whole system on purpose. On purpose. And so it is in our very nature as Christians, one, to redeem things, and two, to be rebellious to the world system. Because, right, you look at Scripture, it's the tale of two cities, Babylon and Jerusalem.
Go ahead.
Right, both physical and the allegorical, and then the application of which city are you a part of. This world is controlled by Babylon, but this universe is controlled by Jerusalem, spiritual Jerusalem. And so we're going to always be rebelling against the world, not for the sake of rebellion, but for the sake of the gospel, and to help rescue people, and using any means necessary. And one of those means, and I'll tell you what, like, I've reached people by God's grace through me, not me personally, that no one else in my area is reaching through music, because no one else, everybody else is like, oh, that's bad. Like, this is because there are satanic bands like that, and because there are, actual gangbangers promoting that, then all of it is bad. And that's not at all how God views things. And we shouldn't either.
Man, I love the way you broke that down. You kind of hit it on every aspect of how I wanted that question answered. I love the way you broke that down. Tell me something. You went from being a radio DJ and then you told me how you began to transition into becoming a youth pastor, and we sort of met in that realm where you were working with kids so let's talk about that transition from moving from music to getting into youth ministry and doing the work you guys do also with the Navajo outreach?
Yeah. So it actually started when I was in high school. Just a real quick rundown of my testimony.
Talk to me.
I started going to church. I was 14 in 1994, and regularly going to youth group. I liked it. I wasn't raised a Christian, but I was a fan of the Bible and Jesus, and I was dating a Christian girl. Now we did not have a godly relationship because I didn't know Jesus, and she obviously was dating a non-believer, and so we had a sinful sexual relationship, and she ended up getting pregnant, and this was like 2 years later, right? And
Right.
I'm like 16, and she called me and said she was pregnant. And that day, on the way to school, while I was just thinking about these things, I started praying for real. And I realized because I never met my biological dad. And so and I had very strange relationships with my two stepdads who, anyway, I got daddy issues. And I realized I want to be in my child's life.
Wow.
I want to be the good dad that I didn't have. I can't do this without a father. And so I need my father in heaven.
Okay.
And so that's when I cried out to him and gave my life to Jesus the day that I found out I was going to be a dad.
Okay, before I stop you, wait, Brian. At 16 years old, you realized you wanted to be in your child's life.
Yes.
Wow, man. Go ahead.
Again, dude, it was because of the Holy Spirit. Because, what 16-year-old, I'm going to be a dad is thinking that, right? It's not just because I'm inherently this awesome guy. It's because the Holy Spirit came in and was like, you didn't have a good dad. You need to be what you didn't have.
Wow.
And so that's how I convinced her to keep the baby.
Yeah.
And then and I was like, and this is going to be embarrassing and this is going to be crazy and all this stuff. So that's what kind of set me on the trajectory to seeking Jesus in my teenage years. Then I got very involved now as a new believer in my church and youth group, became a peer leader, started discipling other guys at 18 years old and all these things, while at the same time being involved in my daughter's life. And I saw her every day. And when I was in Bible college, I spent an hour with her every day. And then I'd take her all day Sundays and I do no schoolwork. No, I didn't work at my In-N-Out burger job. I just went to church with her and then spent the day with her. And I actually spent more time with my daughter than a lot of married men spend with their kids, right? And so, and the girlfriend and I realized the relationship wasn't godly, so we broke up, stayed friends, and we still have a good relationship today. She's actually friends with my wife.
Wow.
She ended up moving to Idaho too when I moved here, because I was like, hey, I'm taking my daughter. I think this is what God wants me to do, but if you want to come up here, I can help you move up here and help you find a place and a church and whatever. And that's exactly what happened. And overall, it was a pretty good relationship. But anyhow, so I came to Idaho, and I had already had an affinity for youth and a love for youth, and realizing I was a troubled teen, right, with daddy issues, teen pregnancy, and all that stuff. So I was like, dude, this is a crucial time in people's lives to know who Jesus is. And then, of course, later on, finding out that the brain doesn't even finish developing until around age 25. And so that's why everybody's favorite music is from your late teens and early 20s. Your favorite genre formed then.
Absolutely.
So if you talk to somebody that goes to college, they'll tell you they have a favorite band in high school and a favorite band in college, or favorite bands, and that sticks with them forever. And every time that music's on the radio, even in their 60s, they're jamming to it. And they're just like, whether it's in the elevator or whatever,
Right.
And so I just realized how influential music was with young people, even back in youth ministry. And so I went to a lot of concerts. My first ever concert was a Christian concert, even before I got saved.
Wow.
And so I was really, seeing the connection between these things. So when I got the offer as a radio DJ at a Christian rock radio station, I also did some DJing and some production and some sermons on the other station, which is more of like teaching and praise and worship. But this was my passion. And really, I joined radio to better reach out to youth. So it was always a passion for youth, and radio and music were just an opportunity and a vehicle to reach them. And so it was a very easy, and I wouldn't even say transition. It was more of acquisition of another avenue of influence.
Okay.
And so that's what the radio ended up becoming for me. And so then the hardest transition was probably going into lead pastoring. But in 2009, I was at a youth workers convention, and a homie of mine and I from Idaho, we were talking about how we felt really called by God to reach the indigenous population of the United States.
Wow.
And I had done some overseas missions, and I spent 3 different 2-week periods in Costa Rica. Love Costa Rica. Still would love to do some stuff there someday. But I felt a heart for, our own people, America, and was like, who are we not reaching? And started looking at statistics and seeing that, native reservations are some of the most unreached groups, partially because they experienced so much oppression in the past from European Americans and felt like Christianity was a European religion, when of course we all know it is very much a Middle Eastern religion. If we're going to, just call it a religion.
Technical, right.
And so realizing we need to reestablish, no matter what color our skin is or where we come from, that this is a faith for everyone and not something that unfortunately was probably used by the kind of more oppressive side of, Caucasian patriarchy or whatever. But anyhow, so when we came to the conference, we met a Navajo bro, and it was my homie that was talking to him. And then he came to me. He's like, "Dude, you need to come and meet these people." And it was Daniel Tate, who is the youth pastor there on the res that you've met. He's the one that does all the really artwork that you've probably seen.
Yeah.
And then it was Sister Sarah, whose husband is James, the pastor of that church that we work with down on the res. And they were there at the Youth Workers Convention because they wanted to better reach their own youth. And so homie started talking with them. He brought me over. We started talking. We were like, "Hey, do you guys ever host groups to come out?" And they're like, "Actually, we do, and we'd love to have you." So our first year going out to the res was in 2009, and the only year we missed was 2020 because of lockdown, and the res was way locked down in 2020. But we even went last year, even though they were still kind of locked down. We didn't do our concert outreach, but yeah, we've been going since 2009.
Wow. Okay, since 2009. I remember Tate. Yeah, I remember Tate. I do. Talk to me more about this year. I know you guys are leaving out Sunday. Tell me a little bit more what the focus is, some of the artists, what's going to be happening this week. And not only that, tell us some of the events, not just the music, because I know you guys do a lot with helping the community out. You've helped restore churches and homes and a lot of different things. I think people don't realize that is more than just a concert. And I didn't know that when I came out in 2013. So give us a little bit more into that.
Yeah. So the music became something, it kind of evolved into part of the outreach that we had gone. But the first couple of years, we never even did any kind of music. And so my homie Tom, which Tom Mong, he came with us the first year because he just wanted to go and do some serving in some way. And so he came by himself, and the way it worked then and the way it still does and always has is the best way for outsiders outside of the reservation. And by the way, the Navajo reservation is less than 3% Christian.
Wow.
So we're talking it's on the level of Japan as far as unreached people, right? And that's right here on American soil, right? And they're the OG Americans. So it's like, dang, we've definitely missed something here. The church has missed something, right? So we go down and we realize we're not going to do no street evangelism. We're not going to go preaching. Right. We're not going to go handing out tracts. We're not going to, especially because most of us are white, and they're immediately going, "Oh, great, yeah. What's your angle now?" Right? And they have a right to be,
Man, I never even looked at it from that perspective. Wow, go ahead, continue.
Yeah. And again, because they've got hundreds of years of, how can we trust outsiders? Before the West was one or whatever, the Spanish came over here and were constantly trying to encroach upon their land. The name Navajo actually is an old Spanish slur, right?
Wow.
So like it's akin to like the N-word for them, because Navajo means horse thief
I didn't
in
know that.
an old Spanish slang. And they embraced it like many people who have been oppressed and had words that were used to try to insult. And so they've embraced it, and they're like, yeah, cool, call us horse thieves. We were stealing horses from you idiots that were oppressing us. So good. Yeah, we're horse thieves. Yeah, we'll embrace that word. But really, their name is Diné, which just means the people. Like most native languages, that's just the word for people is what they call themselves. So they are Diné. So appropriately, Navajos are Diné. But they don't mind the term Navajo. They don't even mind the term Indian, although I don't prefer to use it. But so, but they do see, especially white people, but really anyone that's not Navajo or Native, as a potential threat who just want to encroach upon them and oppress them in some new way. So the best way, and I still think this is one of the best forms of evangelism anyway, is serving. And so before we even started doing concerts, and the reason we do the concerts at the end of the week is that we spend a week of serving. We paint houses inside and out, and outside especially. That red dirt and that wind and that harsh temperature, the ups and downs, because it's 6,000 feet up, so they get very cold winters and very hot summers, and it's dry. So paint gets chipped away and literally sandblasted off their houses. So we've taken and painted a house, once every 2 years sometimes because of how that is. And so you have to imagine they get tired of that. They run out of the money. The res is also at a 46% unemployment rate. And we're out here complaining when we get close to 4%, but 46%, that's almost half of Navajos without a sustainable income.
Wow.
And most of the Navajos that have a decent income is because often the men travel off of the res for months at a time, taking jobs wherever they can and then sending money back home. So a lot of Navajos don't even live on the res because they can't even survive there. But it's their native homeland. They're one of the few native people that actually inhabit their original ancestral lands. And, many, like Choctaw and Chippewa, they've been put in a reservation, but it's not even where they originally had their land. But the Navajos actually have their land.
Wow.
And it's the largest reservation in the contiguous 48. It's about the size of West Virginia. Huge chunk of Arizona where we minister, some of New Mexico, and then even a little sliver of southern Utah. And it touches the 4-state area. But anyhow, so when we go and paint a house, pour a concrete slab, we've actually helped build a tiny house. We sheetrock, we fix and repair. We actually completely renovated a women and children shelter for battered women and children. And so we just do things like that in the name of Jesus, just like he talks about, right? In a cold glass of water in my name, right? And so that's kind of what we're trying to do is the cold glass of water, that refreshment. Then we started doing the concert outreach, and what we did with that was we decided we will let the artists that are coming share about Jesus and the gospel, both through their music and through their own preaching, and then the Navajos themselves. And so the pastor, James, and others will get up on that stage and share.
Yeah.
They'll invite people to their church gatherings, which happen the next day, and all the missionaries will attend. And we have this opportunity to really help the existing church there, building them up instead of trying to plant some new churches that, again, is going to seem very European centric,
Wow.
And so that's kind of been the game plan ever since, and that's for the foreseeable future.
I tell you one thing, man, just talking to you about that, it reminds me of the time I've had when I was there, and just realizing that even though I was there, I still didn't get the fullness of everything that was going on. The time goes by so fast. You're so hot in the evening. You're so cold at night.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
all of your clothes is just red, covered in clay. So you're wondering like, wow, but so much is going on, and I'm just so happy that you got an opportunity just to share exactly what's going on. So with that being said, I know I've had you a little bit over 30 minutes. I promised you 30 minutes, but you're a pastor. You understand.
No, that's cool, man.
You understand. We go over time. Talk to me a little bit more about, okay, where we talked about that, but you told me that you had similar topics sort of dealing with ADHD and autism and OCD. Talk to me about that. How does Pastor Bryan, just expound on that to me, because when you said
Yeah.
that kind of I highlighted it. I can't remember exactly why, but I want you to just go into it for me.
Yeah, for sure. So this is something I'm super passionate about, especially in the last 18 months. And I was diagnosed as a kid with ADHD, and I'm not against people taking medications that will help them. I do think that medications are pushed more than they should be, and many people have developed addictions unnecessarily.
Yeah.
So I do think that they are being abused and misused by, you know, for the capital gains of the pharmaceutical companies and such. But when I was a kid in ADHD, the medication was Ritalin, and
Wow.
they told my mom, your son has ADHD, which they then called ADD, and said you need to put him on Ritalin. And bless my mom, she said, "No, I like him that way." and so uh, and so I kind of grew up always knowing um, I have attention issues. But what's interesting, first of all, is that the misconception, ADHD is named by people without ADHD. And so, like many minority groups of any kind, whether neurodivergent minorities or people of ethnicities or whatever, the labels put on by society are mostly inaccurate because they're not labels put on by representatives of the community. And so ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder,
Yeah.
there's a problem with almost all of those words,
Yeah.
right? Attention is involved, but there's not a deficit of attention. It's the neurotypicals, or people without ADHD. When they deal with an ADHD person, they feel like, hey, you're not listening to me.
Wow.
Hey, you kind of interrupt me. Hey, you're all over the place. So what it is kind of an ableist term saying you have a problem with attention. When in actuality, the science proves that there's not a deficit of attention. There's a abundance of attention, but the problem is it's hyper focus. So when I focus on something that I'm interested in, I can't break my focus. I stay on it, and I'll work 14 hours on something that somebody else, their brain starts like bleeding out after 3 because I'm interested. But in things I'm not interested in,
Okay.
it is near impossible to put my attention on it, and obviously causes some issues. And so understanding it is a big part of it, and to be able to like help with it. But understanding that God made me this way and designed me this way is another thing that's helped me so much. And so people like Einstein, he was ADHD. And one of the reasons he was so brilliant, he wasn't smarter necessarily than anyone else. He would just hyper focus on figuring this out. How do we come up with an equation to explain energy? How do I get to E equals MC squared? He just decided, I'm so interested in finding this out, that he would not stop. He was unstoppable. His attention was not broken until he figured it out. Where a regular person would go, dang, it's time for me to call it a night. Einstein's going to just keep rolling until he figures it out. He'd be up for 40, 50 hours sometimes at a time, figuring something out, which of course is problematic for your own physical health. But to be able to get things done, neurodivergents aren't smarter than other people, but when they're interested in something, they're naturally more dedicated and able to keep their attention on it. So again, ADHD is again a little bit of an ableist term. It's like whatever, we'll use it, but it's neurodivergence, ADHD, OCD, and autism are all part of kind of a triangle of what you call executive dysfunction. And that is the executive part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, struggles with getting tasks started that you're not interested in.
Okay.
But it struggles with stopping tasks that you are interested in. And you can get, you almost feel kind of crazy because you're like, I can't stop doing this. I can't stop doing this. And so you get, again, super focused, which again is advantageous if it's something that is beneficial. And so for me with music, I never get tired of it. I would do stuff involved in music. That's why I was like listening, attending shows, radio promotion, and then booking shows, and now continuing to use music as an outreach. And by the way, this year's artists, for the first time ever, we don't have any hip hop artists. Um, we have a punk rock band, and we have a hardcore punk band, and maybe a couple of metal bands.
Wow.
And which again, cool. God's doing his thing,
Right.
and I'm not trying to pick one genre or the other, but that was a group that we wanted to be represented in the earlier years. We didn't, and now it's all we have, and so God's just doing his thing. But sorry, back to it. There's the ADHD. I do get linked and then on this other thing and go, oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. So OCD, ADHD, and autism can often be related. And what you find out is that often you have what's called a comorbidity. So if you have ADHD, you probably have another issue attached to it just because of the way the brain works. And what happens is your amygdala, that's the fight or flight part of your brain. It's a crazy little dude in there. For people with ADHD, that thing gets tripped a lot more often, right? And so we have more of a propensity for depression and anxiety than the average person. We also have a lower life expectancy because people with ADHD end up either they end up dealing with debilitating depression, and unfortunately, often they're more likely to take their own lives, or because of their impulsivity, will take more risks that they shouldn't, which obviously decreases your lifestyle. And undealt with anxiety can cause obviously like hypertension and heart issues. So we actually have a lower life expectancy because of it. So it's just kind of an interesting thing that you don't think about, but it is a much more serious issue than the average person is aware of. And about 18 months ago, I experienced for the first time in my life, not just depression, which I've dealt with off and on through my entire life, and God has always given me victory, but I've always dealt with. But I started getting crippling anxiety for the first time in my life.
Wow.
And it lasted for about 2 weeks. And it was crazy because as a pastor, my personal favorite thing to ever do as a pastor is baptisms, right? And we have a practice in our church of if someone was very influential in you coming to Jesus or in the gospel being planted in you, that's the person that should baptize you. So we are not a church that believes only pastors and elders can baptize people.
Good.
The Great Commission, Jesus says to all Christians, go and preach the gospel to all the nations, right?
Yes.
Baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you, and I will be with you to the end of the age. So evangelism belongs to every Christian. Baptism belongs to every Christian. Discipleship belongs to every Christian. However, often, because a pastor is very influential, I am the person that baptizes someone, but only because they've decided I am the influential person that they would like to be involved in their baptism. So we started out a baptism in January of 2021, and it was like first baptism since lockdown. It was awesome. We had 7 people baptized, and the last girl that was baptized was a girl who had a crazy past. And me and the elder that baptized her got to see more than everybody else because we were up close. But when she was 13 years old, her dad, who was a lay pastor, he was part of a car club, and they had like all these like lowriders and all these things that they travel and do these shows. Well, he had a non-Christian friend from that car club that needed a place to stay and stayed with him. Well, he ended up kidnapping her at 13, taking her to Mexico.
Oh, wow.
Making her his personal sex slave at first and then pimping her out. And she was in Mexico City, one of the worst places in the world to be in the sex trade.
Wow.
And crazy, long story short, the FBI in the United States actually did a good job, and they were able to help her to escape and then get to a safe spot and bring her back to the United States. But through all that, obviously, she dealt with a lot of trauma, and her dad did not handle it well, didn't really help with the healing process, kind of tried to sweep it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. And so she went on this downward spiral mentally and sexually and got super messed up. And the Lord had put it on my heart. She came to visit our church with her then boyfriend and baby daddy. And I felt very drawn to reach out to both of them and stayed in contact. And then a few years later, she ended up coming to the church and coming to Christ, and she wanted to get baptized. So she was the last one getting baptized, and it was very emotional, very beautiful. Wow. And when me and Aiden, the other elder, put her down into the water, in her hand, she had a picture. and it was a group photo of the car club, and in the middle was this guy, and she had him circled about 40 times.
Wow.
And so as she went down into the water, she crumbled that as kind of like a death to that old life.
Oh wow,
And
man.
it was amazing. So this was my spiritual high, right? Like, what
Wow.
cooler way to start the new year than to see all of these people, but especially this young woman, transformed, who at 13 had a horrific experience, the worst of her life, and at 26, 13 years later, had a complete turnaround because of the gospel
Come
and the
on,
church family
man.
that she had a part of. So I was just like, dude, I'm on a high. But 3 days later, at exactly the same time, 6 p.m., I had anxiety hit me out of nowhere, like I'd never experienced before. I immediately called my wife and asked her to pray with me over the phone. I was finishing up my preparations to teach Wednesday night small group, and I just started crying profusely. And this anxiety lasted nonstop for 2 weeks. I almost took myself to the hospital because
Wow.
I didn't know what was happening. And so that continued to come and go, and it wasn't consistent. So it didn't end up becoming what you consider clinical anxiety. So I never ended up needing to go to the doctor, but it was this rolling thing, and I believe it's spiritual. And as that happened, I realized and started doing more research on ADHD and realizing how many of the symptoms of my life and things that I even thought were part of my personality turned out to be related to my ADHD and just the way that God wired my brain. And then I learned to appreciate, thank God for, and then learn some natural hacks to help with the difficulties that come along naturally with ADHD and neurodivergence. And I
Okay.
also have what you would call a comorbidity, like I was telling you, RSD, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria.
Okay.
And that is where it makes me a natural people pleaser, but any kind of rejection is a lot harder to process.
Wow.
And I look back at my life, I'm like, dude, that makes sense. I was always such a coward with women. Loved to flirt, but I never asked a girl out of my life. Even my wife made the first moves
Wow.
in our relationship. I did propose to her, but only because I knew she was going to say yes. But any chance of rejection, I could not handle, right? And so learning that I had that kind of comorbidity and dealing with my own sinful nature, trying to take advantage of those things, I've been able to increase my ability to handle rejection, be able to say no to people, not be such a people pleaser, and actually be a better obedient Christian to the Word of God, knowing my more of how my nature is. And so it's just one of those things I love to raise awareness for and help people understand. And that so there's about 8% of kids with ADHD, and it's a little harder to find in females, right? So little girls often have ADHD and their parents don't know because it shows up differently in women. Um, but adults, a lot of kids by around puberty, when your brain starts to make that change into adulthood, it kind of self-corrects, kind of like kids getting their grown-up teeth. Kind of
Right.
takes in and then boom. So half of kids with ADHD end up don't having it in adulthood. But the other half of us do end up having it. And if we're not aware of it, we can end up having unnecessary frustrations, self-hatred, doubts, all kinds of stuff, where if we do understand how God wired us, we can not only accept it, we can kind of roll with it and see it as, in some ways, a superpower, in other ways, a limitation that we need to be humbled by, and then actually operate, enjoy life better, enjoy God better, glorify Him more. So I just have a huge passion for it.
Man, I'm telling you, just listening to you, it reminds me of I can see some things that even with myself, how our lives kind of sort of parallel in some of the things. So I know that I'm going to add this video to YouTube and Facebook Live, and everybody's going to be able to listen to it. But if anybody you literally was speaking some things that were kind of helping me understand even some of the things why I do what I do. Because I was similar to you as well. Like but I kind of overcorrected. Growing up, I flirted a lot, but I didn't ask you out. So then I got to a point where if you didn't like me, it was your fault.
Yep.
Because I
Yep.
started getting over as you get older, you get
Yep.
muscles, you start becoming
It's the way you try
someone.
to deal with it.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
now I'm not gonna
Totally.
let you hurt me. I'm gonna let you know you
Yep.
messed up for not
Yep.
even wanting me. It's your fault. So I get that
Yep.
mindset and how you were talking about. So I thank you for even sharing those things because I never thought that this podcast would go in that direction where it goes to a point where I can relate so deeply to almost everything you literally said today. But before we
Yeah,
close this
dude, and
down,
I
man,
knew
go
we
ahead.
always vibe. I could see your posts. Yeah, and I knew we vibe.
Yeah, we did. It's kind of like even when we on the res, it's kind of like we just you can tell people that have sort of like I don't really like the term, but kindred spirits almost. We that just connect. So I get it. I
Yep.
get it.
Yeah.
It kind of
Yeah.
flows. So I kind of think that
Yeah.
we kind of
Yeah.
need to cultivate this connection a little bit more, even further outside of the podcast world, because there's something there. I
Yeah.
can't
I'm
really
down.
I can't really tell, but I can't ghost you next time you come to Dallas, man. So,
Yeah.
but we
Yeah.
definitely not going in and out. But we'll get something. We're gonna have to spend some
We can
time
do
together,
Whataburger,
brother.
bro. I like Whataburger
Oh,
too.
come
That's
on,
cool.
man. We can't do that either. Wait, you just gonna give me the two worst franchises of fast
Oh,
food?
dang. So you're a burger elitist. Oh man,
Yeah,
you got to show me
I
what you
need good. Yeah, I need good Angus beef, man. I need burgers. I can't. But
got.
before we go, I put a Facebook question out about, and it was kind of funny. I took it from another podcast, but I want to get your perspective. Seeing as where you were going, I usually ask someone's top five something, but I don't want to go there with you because you kind of set kind of a climate where I can ask you this, and I know you're going to give me an answer where people can think about. Okay, the question is loyalty or love? Go.
Loyalty or love? Yeah. So I guess maybe we need to first define those things, right?
Yes, sir.
Because
Yes, sir.
love is such a undefined word, right?
Okay.
And so love, obviously, can say, we were talking about burgers. I love burgers, right? But I also love my wife. You know, I also love my church fam. I love my best friends. I love a lot of things. But love, I say, is devotion that is willing to sacrifice. And so for me, I think that love and loyalty are synonymous because of my definitions of those two terms. Because loyalty, of course, is, sticking by somebody or something, whether you have like a loyalty to a certain company or a certain friend or a certain brand or whatever. But I think, to me, if we're just, when it comes to my mind, those things are synonymous. That loyalty is part of true love. But I definitely can see why some people would see these as two different things. And if you have a choice, one or the other, and some people are like, you know what? I don't care if you like me, just don't cheat on me.
Right.
And I go, okay. In relationships, I appreciate that. But I do think that you should be cultivating the like part of relationships,
on,
both friendships and romantic relationships. Love is a commitment, right? It's a commitment of loyalty, but to like someone. When I say I like you, when I already say I love you all the time, it now means something even more, right?
Wow.
Because what that means is even when I don't um, feel strong feelings for you, I'm committed to being around you, right? That's the love part. But like is the I actually enjoy your presence. And so sometimes I like you in a friendship or in a romantic relationship can mean more than I love you.
Wow.
And then, of course, loyalty is one of those things where it's like it speaks louder than words. When you look and see who your actual ride or die people are, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about romantic or friend relationships, people who've been by you when you've been at your worst, that speaks volumes about their love for you. So I don't know. I don't know if I answered that the right way, but I kind of see them more related than.
No, that's a good way to answer it, man. That's a great way because it's your perspective on your experiences, your knowledge, your wisdom, where
Yeah.
you can kind of put it in where it becomes real to you. Me personally, I don't
Right.
think you can separate the two, but I like the fact that people try to because it makes you think because like you said, you really can't have loyalty without love. And you really can't have
Right.
love without being loyal because my
Right.
love for you provokes me to be loyal to you. But
Right.
before we both start preaching, because we both have it in us, man, I want to thank you for coming to the podcast, man. I know I've been bugging you lately. And for those of you that don't know, he came in a clutch. I had a guest that was scheduled that couldn't make it, and they had a valid reason. They didn't ghost me. They'll be back on. But he came in. I really had Bryan scheduled to come in sometime in July, but he jumped the line and came in and was ready to go. Had the Discord ready and just was ready to go. Came in. He led the show. As you can see, I had questions and Bryan took. That's a great guest. You come in, you get the question, you lead the show. I love guests like that, man. I appreciate you, man. I think that off line we gotta connect even more because there's clearly something there, man. And like I said, man, I appreciate just you guys, just you and Tom and you guys' passion for what you guys done, man, and what you're doing with the Navajo community. They appreciate it a lot. Even I have as you can see, like if you look at my friends list, I have pretty much almost everyone we've met there. You can tell that you guys planted something there because they still love us even though I haven't been there in like 5 years. So thank you, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. Anytime on the show or off, dude, I'd be totally down to hang out.
Too easy, man. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you guys for watching the podcast, and I'm going to upload this to YouTube. Thanks again to Bryan for coming out and just showing your boy some love, man. And thanks again for just sharing the wisdom. I'm going to add a lot of clips because he gave us a lot of nuggets that I think we need to get in their own separate scenarios. So thanks again to Bryan. Thanks again to everyone that watched. I didn't have as many comments this time, maybe because it's early and some of you guys are probably working or whatever. But we're going to get this thing out there, you all. This has been another I Should Do a Podcast with Ramee, and we're out.
Peace out.
Man, thank you, Bryan.
Yeah, dude, my pleasure, bro. It was fun. It was good to hang out. Thanks for letting me talk too much.
No, man, you did an excellent job, man. I can tell you, man, that I'm going to have some clips and stuff to share, and it's going to be amazing, man. You shared a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge, and it was enough to keep my attention, so it was good. Thank you.
Right on.
Thank you.